Voice TV.
Hello viewers, you're most welcome to Soaring with Eagles talk show. My name is Pastor Joy Ninsiima, and today I have an amazing guest. She's the Deputy General Director of Uganda Civil Aviation Authority, Mrs Olive B Lumonya. You're most welcome to this show.
Thank you very much,
So,
Pastor Joy, and I'm happy to be here with you.
amen. We are also very happy to have you. I know how busy you are. And for you to avail time to be with us today, we are very grateful.
Thank you very much.
So, Mrs. Lumonya, can you start by telling us a bit about the mandate that you hold? What do you actually do in Uganda Civil Aviation Authority?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Uganda Civil Aviation Authority is a government agency. It's a parastatal that is established by the Act of Parliament. And as part of the Act of Parliament, we have specific requirements or roles that we do. One of them is development of the aerodromes. When we say aerodromes, these are the airports. If you see the developments that are going on in Entebbe International Airports, the development of Kabalega or Kabale International Airport, the development of Kasese, Gulu, all those aerodromes that you see, that is the mandate of Uganda Civil Aviation Authority. On top of that, we also develop the regulations.
Yes.
Because if you're working within the aviation sector, it is a highly regulated industry. It is regulated by the International Civil Aviation Organization, what we call ICAO. So all the countries in the world, I could say 99% of the countries in the world, must comply with the ICAO regulations, and the ICAO sits in Canada. So one of the second responsibility is the regulations.
Yes.
We set the regulations, we take them through the whole process of approval, cabinet, parliament, and these become law. But we also ensure that these regulations are in sync with the International Civil Organization regulations, because we get our mandate from the ICAO regulations. So that's another responsibility that we have. The other one is provision of air navigation services. Air navigation services, I could say, is a control. If you see how the aircrafts run, if you visited the airport today, we have the control towers, which controls how the plane is flying, the one which communicates to the plane when it's about to land, if the plane has any challenges. So we provide the air navigation services, a whole comprehensive role that we do. And that role is very critical in ensuring that there's safety in the airline industry. The other one is licensing of airlines. An airline cannot just wake up and appear and land in Entebbe International Airport. We license airlines, both national airlines
and international
airlines. The licensing with the international airlines, they are already licensed in the countries where they are, but they fulfill certain requirements before they can be allowed to land into Uganda. But all those that are registered into Uganda, they go through a specific procedure to confirm that they can actually comply. The aircrafts are in the right order and condition. The aircrafts will give the service that we require and will ensure safety and security of the passengers. So they will go through a 5-phase process. So we license all the airlines that come, and we also license the crew, the pilots, and all other people, because those pilots must also submit the required evidence that they can actually fly those specific aircraft, that they have the flying hours that are required of them, that they have the experience that is required of them. So in brief, they are more than that.
Yes.
But for the sake of the time
we have,
I can mention just those as part of the mandate that we are empowered as a Civil Aviation Authority and running the day-to-day of the airport, Entebbe International Airport. Those are our mandate. We put them up and we run them.
You run them. It's a big mandate. So this show really showcases individuals that are excelling in their area of expertise. So that is why you're here, because we know that God has really raised you high. Yes, but we want to now go back to the time how did you grow up? What kind of family did you grow up in?
Okay. Wow, those are many years ago, Mr. Joy. I grew up, my father, the late Isaac Sajabi, was a policeman who later became a superintendent of police in charge of Jinja, Iganga, Kamuli. And that was a big post taking through districts. But in the same vein, we grew up in a big family. We were many children.
Was it a polygamous?
In a polygamous setup. Yes. And I recall very well that in that polygamous setup, my father had one specific unique area. He loved the girls and protected the girls. So we kept asking whether, because he knew that the girls needed a lot of protection, so all the girls, we went to boarding primary schools from the beginning. And boys were in the day schools, but the girls were in the boarding schools. And the other bit is that even in this family, he brought us together. And we kept wondering how he managed to make all of us in sync and love each other so closely in this polygamous family. So he was a very clever man. I think he had maybe studied some of this psychology, because somehow each of us was given a husband from another mother.
He called it a husband.
So if you were born,
that was your brother.
If you're born, he would say, now that Olive is born, the person who's going to take care of Olive up to until she gets married is Peter from another mother. So you were protected by somebody. Up to the time when you got married, that brother would be the one to give you away, whether you had brothers from your mother or not. So it brought a lot of closeness.
Right.
Then he was a very religious man who participated in the construction of churches. Actually, in our village, there's a church that is referred to him as one of the gentlemen who began the church, giving away land to the church. So he from an early stage, we all believed in going to church and praying. My mother is still alive. She's just turned 80. She was also in prison, now a retired policewoman, but very industrious. She remained working, business, supplying schools, growing. She did everything else I can think of, as long as it helped her to raise income, especially in the business areas, to support her family. But I learned a lot of my religious background and belief is my mother.
Is your mother?
Because we used to call her a prayer warrior.
Yes.
She never went anywhere, whether it's a business, without praying. She believed in waking up at 5. So you'd all wake up at 5, pray, and her prayer ends with a song. To date, last Sunday.
Is it the same song or?
She kept, but she had some that are still the same old Njubege, all those. So last Sunday I was in Iganga and I remember they said, Mama, we better pray now. Because she will pray and pray and pray for everyone. And she did this and we learned all the songs in Luganda. So if you put us in a church of Luganda, we'll sing all the songs, but from childhood.
Yes.
So that is my family. Many of us are still living. Some of them have passed on from that big family. Yeah, and I think that's what I can. I started my early childhood in Budini Girls' School. It's one of those very good Catholic schools at that time. Very, very strict on religion. And I studied in that school for my primary. Thereafter, I joined Iganga Secondary School, which is now a girls' school for my O level. And later I moved on to Namasagali College for my A level.
There's a very interesting story about Namasagali College. Can you tell the viewers about that story?
It's an interesting story because I recall when I completed my senior 4 in Iganga Secondary School, I performed very well. And I was admitted. Those days they used to say they've called me back. Not like today, they would send you a letter of invitation to say you have performed well. We have admitted you for senior 5 and this is your combination. So they wrote and gave me history, economics, geography. If you see my pictures, I was very tiny like that. So I thought of it, I said, I can't do geography because the perception of geography was very hard and many students had not been performing well. And I loved literature, writing and communicating. So I went to the school and met the headmistress alone and I said, I've come in to request you to allow me to go for literature. And she looked at me and she said, no. You are actually going to offer geography. And I said, I don't think so because, and she said, why? I said, I passed it by accident, not because I knew what to do. But she insisted. So what I did, I came back home and I said, I had always admired to go to Namasagal College.
Why?
Somehow my brother.
Oh, your brother.
College. But then I had heard about the innovativeness of the school.
Yes.
You live an all-rounder student, not only academic, but you come out a complete child. So I got on to, it's an interesting story that I keep remembering. They gave me money. I got into a taxi from Jinja to Kamuli. That's 80 kilometers. From Kamuli to reach Namasagali, I sat on a truck. And it was a dusty truck. So one lady saw me, this tiny girl, and gave me a kavera to cover my hair because everybody was covered for the dust. Another 40 kilometers. When I reached Namasagali College, I remember the secretary, Monica, she's still alive. She remembers me. So I went in and then she said, what have you come to do? I said, I've come in to meet Father. She said, where are your parents? I said, I'm alone. She said, Father Grimes only sees children. She said, your child has parents. I said, but they are not here. So as I was still talking to her, Father Grimes walks in. And he comes in and the secretary says, Father, there's a young girl, a child here who wants to see you. So he looked at me. He used to wear these glasses, pulled them down. So come in. So I walked in. I said, Father Grimes, this is my admission at Twigama Secondary School, but I actually prefer to do literature. And they've not offered me that opportunity. So he looked at me and said, you've come along all the way? I said, yes, Father. I walked out with that admission letter.
Can you imagine?
That's at a time when getting a position in Namasagali College
was so difficult.
Was almost impossible. So I came back, got to the same transport onto the tracks because there were no transport that road. Kamuli, back to Jinja. I reached home, everybody was like, maybe they thought I'd got lost or something went wrong. It was 7 p.m. So that's how my journey in Namasagali College begins. And I can tell you my leadership journey also begins in Namasagali College. Because once I reported, I think Father Grimes had spotted me as somebody maybe who had some
leadership
qualities, which maybe sometimes we don't recognize them in children. But I think he recognized that in the conversation I had. So once I reported, I was appointed a judge. The judge is that you were one who was acted like a real judge in courts of law. Because there was a legal system that if committed an offense, you'd be arrested by somebody, a reeve. And then you'd be tried in courts of law to defend yourself. So if you came and defended yourself and you proved yourself, I would acquit you. Or I would sentence you to 5 sticks. Or I'd give you a warning, whatever decision I did. So 1 year later, he again appointed me as lead chancellor. Lead chancellor was the top highest position in the school.
Oh, and that's like a head girl or head boy?
Above the head girl, because for lead chancellor, you were the appellant court. The courts of appeal. So the lead chancellor could cause an offense and be arrested, but the lead chancellor was above the law. I think that the role that I had, even if Father Grimes expelled a student, they had a right to appeal to the lead chancellor. And I remember one gentleman who is in Kampala today, I think he had been expelled. His case was, the young people, they had alcohol, all those matters. And I think he decided to appeal. And when he comes to me, I think 4 days later, and they say, you put it in writing and I'm appealing. So when the judges came and the reeves, I said, yes, he's appealing. He said, no, he was found alcohol. He was drunk. The guy said, Madam Lead Chancellor, that's not true. I said, okay, could you produce the evidence? There was no evidence. Do you have any pictures? Remember that time there were no phones. There were no photos. There was nothing.
So there was
and
nothing.
He was acquitted.
And yet he had really been drinking.
We were not able, like from where I sat, the guy put on a show and said, it's not true. These guys are just against me. I brought my grab. I refused to share with them. I did this. He had his story well packed. So Father Grimes walks out of his office and he went red. I said, Father, I have acquitted him. There's no evidence. He was red, but I respected him. He put in place laws. I respected them. He said, Madam Birungi, acquitted? He was red for a short minute and said, okay, you're the late chancellor. So he built your capacity into leadership. And for me, I believe my beginning of the leadership journey starts from there. And then I joined university, Makerere University.
What did you do?
Mass communication, because that time the two top courses was mass communications and law. I performed very well, went in for mass communication. I immediately stood for Chair Lead Africa Hall.
In second year?
Second year.
Wow.
And I became the first unopposed chairperson in 10 years. So I was Chair Lead Africa Hall. That still was strengthening my leadership. The following year, when we were completing, there was an opportunity to stand for the Uganda National Students Association, which is the national for the country. Again, I went and stood for that position of vice chair. Again, I went through as vice chair, so you can see my leadership.
Yes.
So many things that I kept doing. And then from there, I was also nominated by government to represent the young people in the Commonwealth Youth Program Africa region. Still, when I went there, I stood for Vice Chair Africa, and I became Vice Chair. Later on, I became the Chair Commonwealth Youth Program, and later I was sponsored by the UN to represent the women on the very first, on the famous World Global Conference of Beijing, where I was able to present.
Was that still when you were in Makerere?
When now I had just
finished.
Because UNISA, Uganda National Students Association, is as you get out of the university. And that's how you end up. But I must say, one of the things that I remember, one item that stands out for me, when we went to contest for leadership of Uganda National Students Association in Bali, we were taken to Bali University. I remember that we were waiting for the Ministry of Gender officials to arrive, and it was raining cats and dogs. And all the students were in this hall waiting to see how those old people are going
to run into the...
I think raising and I think loving people is something that should walk into your blood. I just walked around, collected 5 umbrellas. I ran with the umbrellas to the car, passed on these umbrellas, forgetting that I was also getting wet, and then ran back. Something any young girl can do, came back to the hall. So when I received a message after that I was being invited to the Ministry of Gender, and then I was informed that you have been nominated to represent Uganda to the Commonwealth Youth Program.
You wondered how?
I wondered, but how?
Yes.
So one of the commissioners came in and said, you are very disciplined, young girl. You see, you can be 5 of you, very knowledgeable, brilliant with PhDs, but one will stand out on attitude, character, and behavior. I think you stood out and you stand out.
Just because you went out to give them umbrellas?
I gave the umbrellas, and I think they watched thereafter, because I did it without thinking of anything.
Yes.
I had never even thought that when you do the umbrella, when you care for people, but what I knew from my raising is that to us, that's how we were raised. The older people, we always respected them. If you could do anything for them, if they find you seated up to today, I'll leave my chair.
Yes.
No matter the position I hold today. If somebody is older than me, I'll leave the chair for him. Or I'll ask them to bring somebody to bring a chair. So that's where I pick the attitude, the values, and so for me, I think that is my education.
Yes. Didn't you do a master's?
I did, yeah. Thereafter, wow, that's another story, because once I graduated from Makerere University with mass communication, I was the best female student for my year. And I had also got an award of second best female writing journalist student for the year. I got a scholarship, a partial scholarship to Rhodes University, South Africa, for a master's in mass communication. And that was 1 year out of university. But I can tell you I didn't take it.
Okay.
I didn't take the master's.
The master's.
And Rhodes University was one of those prestigious universities that any student went to. But I remember in the discussion I asked them, I said, if I have done mass communication for all these years and I have excelled in all areas of mass comm, what added value will the master's in mass communication add on me?
Felt
I
like
don't
doing
intend,
something.
yes, I
something
said I
like
don't intend to lecture.
Mm.
I don't want to go into academia. I think my brain wants something else. And I'd already joined that time the Nile Breweries Limited and South Africa Breweries had brought in the brand manager opportunity. So I said, I think I need to do marketing.
Oh.
So as opposed to doing my master's then, I later did my MBA from Ninsiima. I went in for the chartered marketing. I did the Chartered Institute of Marketing UK, completed that, became a chartered marketer. And then I said, okay, with my chartered marketing and with my mass communication and all the courses that I've done, I think the best is the MBA from Ninsiima. It gives me the leadership, it gives me the governance, and it gives me the knowledge of how I can run an organization. And thereafter, I did a number. I also went in and became a certified balance scorecard champion for the USA. I also got an opportunity to study at the London Business School to grow on my marketing, driving forces. And later, I became an Africa Board Fellow. Africa Board Fellow. I did that course for 1 year in Cape Town.
Africa Board Fellow? What's
Board
that?
Fellow.
What does that mean?
It's a course that grounds you in boards, in the boardroom. That even if you turned me today and put me in a board, it doesn't matter whether you know any idea about that board, whether I'm a professional doctor, whether I have done electricity, whether you have what it takes when you put in a setup and your responsibility is to provide governance to that organization that you can. So when you do that course, there are few people who have done that, but you'll be referred to as an Africa Board Fellow. So when you present it, somebody will know, yes, she's grounded in governance. If I presented it to you, you say, yes, I think if I'm looking for a board member, I think she has what it takes to do the board. And so that's how I enter into the boardroom.
Because you enter into the boardroom because you're on many boards.
Yes, I've served on many.
Yes.
Of course, now there are few because boards, you serve them.
You keep on serving over a time.
After your 2 terms, you exit and then take on another board. But once I got into the boardroom, I must say that I started by serving voluntary as a board member. Many times, everybody looks for boards that pay. But I went in for boards that are voluntary, that touch community. So I started with USO, the Uganda Women's Effort to Save Orphans, because I had a passion for the orphans, vulnerable children. So I gave my service on those boards as a voluntary. Later, I joined the Uganda Health Marketing Group, if you remember that very famous NGO, which was looking at supporting communities on HIV, malaria, maternal, and again served for 8 years there. And then I served on the PACE, which is PSI, still looks at health and support for community. So my grounding in the NGO sector starts purely as a voluntary board member. But it grounded me to such a level that I could go in and serve any other board, together with all the other certificates that I did. So thereafter, I've served on other boards. I've served on the DFC Women in Business for about 6 years. I resigned on DFCU when I was appointed on the board of Finca, because that would be conflict of interest. And 2 years later, I became the chairperson of Finca Bank. I've served there for 2 terms, and now I'm serving another 1 year as we try to find a board chair. So those are boards. Finca, I'll be ending my term this year. But I've joined the board of UAP, Holy Mutual, which is in Africa. I'm sitting on that board. And then I sit on the board of Uganda Tourism Board.
Wow.
And then now I chair the board of USO, which is an NGO. The other boards have been on Uganda Child Rights NGO Network that I've served. I served on the board of Uganda Civil Aviation Authority.
Before you were employed, yes.
I came back later, but I served on that board for 6 years, 2014 to 2019. And that grounded me into aviation.
Exactly.
Because once I was appointed, I was actually asked to chair the board of the Safety, Security and Technical Committee of the board. That's the biggest committee. It will look at the security, it will look at the safety, it will look at everything that you would want to know about aviation. And by my nature, I went in and took in interest. And I did all the certificates, the trainings that grounded me to aviation. So when I come back years later, it's not as hard as it could be.
Of course,
because much as I'm not a pilot, I'm not an aviator, I'm not an aeronautical engineer, I fitted in very well because you're looking for my leadership at that stage. So I think on boards, those are the boards that I have served on, and I try to ensure that I'll always have about 3 boards because you also want to give value.
Yes.
And the experience I can share with you, Pastor Joel, is that when you're given an opportunity to serve, do a good job. Many times people are appointed into positions on the boardroom, on anything, and they will not give in their whole self. Boards are by referral. When you go to one board, perform and excel, somebody will recommend you to another board, and to another board, and to another board. If you go to one board, because as I said, they are by referral, the people who refer people to boards are people who have sat on boards. And I will refer, they will ask me, Olive, do you know Jen? And then you will not refer somebody who was not committed, because you don't want your name to be tainted. Somebody trusts you and says, Madam Lumonya, could you recommend somebody? And I'll say, wow, in finance, I think this gentleman has was very good, committed, thorough, professional. So even in the boardroom, you will know who is a serious person, who reads their board papers, who takes keen interest in understanding the business, and then you keep referring. That's why you end up finding some people are referred to boards, others will serve one board, and that's never be referred. Because they will either be the character, some people get into boards and they have conflict and confusion in the boardroom. Nobody wants that. Everybody wants a smooth board that respects management, and management respects the board, and they are able to offer the oversight role and responsibility, because the roles are very clear. Not to become operational, provide the policy guidelines, strategic direction, budget. So once you know your roles, I think that's what I've done when it comes to the boardroom.
And for people who might be listening, because there's a time that, well, for you started really early, because you gave voluntary service. But I've heard of many people where they reach a certain age and they really want to be on boards. They want to serve on boards. So it's whatever you have told the viewers is a very good thing. Yeah, so we'll be right back after this break.
Coming soon to Manifest TV.
Mukama waffe yeebazibwe, abantu ba Katonda mwenna abatulaba abatwagala, mbalamusizaako nnyo mu nnyera ya Mukama waffe Yesu. Bannange neebaza Mukama, twebaza Mukama kubanga mmanyi twalindirira dda purogulaamu ey'Oluganda. Kaakano bannaye ke kaseera ku Manifest TV buli Lwakusatu ku ssaawa 2 ez'akawungeezi mpaka ssaawa 3.
Katonda bwe yayagala ensi n'okuwaayo n'awaayo omwana we omu yekka.
Omuntu yenna aweereddwa etteeka ng'obulamu bw'ategedde otambuliramu talimanya Kristo.
Abantu abasinga naffe twaliwe batyo nga twebuuza twawulira amateeka kisa tubitegeera, naye nze okuva we neeyunga ku kisa kino natandika okulaba ku bibala.
Beeranga ng'oteekako manyi tojja kusigala kyekimu kubanga twalindirira dda purogulaamu eno. Kano ke kaseera abadde bagitusaba okubeera nga mubeerako. Mbaagaliza ekiseera ekirungi.
Manifest TV, Christ revealed.
Let it shine. You put in the hours to make your brand the greatest. You go the extra mile to allow it to achieve success. It deserves to be treated the right way, to be given the attention it deserves, and not stay in the dark. Advertise with Manifest Television to get your brand into the light. Manifest TV, Christ revealed.
Welcome back from the break. You're still watching Soaring with Eagles live on Manifest TV. My name is Pastor Joy Ninsiima, and my guest today is Mrs Olive Lumonya, the Deputy Director General of Uganda Civil Aviation. We were talking about your education background, how you grew up. Now we want to talk about your career. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Pastor Joy. On my career, I graduated with mass communication. And before graduation, I was already working. Because my internship, I enjoyed writing a lot.
Yes.
So while in Makerere, I used to write stories from Makerere University and sending them to New Vision and the Weekly Topic newspaper then, which turned into Monitor. So after my graduation, the Weekly Topic gave me a job. So I started writing stories, publishing stories.
What kind of stories?
Some of the stories I did, I became a news reporter. So I would be in Parliament and I report a story about Parliament. The story that I remember, which is very visible, was about female circumcision in Kapchorwa. And that story, I wrote it with passion. And I interviewed the girls that had been circumcised. And once that story came out, it was a front page story. And it opened
many doors
for me.
Yes.
Because I wrote it with passion. And I felt it was a wrong thing for anybody to be doing that to a girl. I interviewed those who had gone through it and the trauma they had, and those who had managed to escape it. So that was me writing. Later, I think after 1 year, Nile Breweries then wanted a PR manager, PR officer. So I went to Nile Breweries. I remember going to the office of Ronnie Madvan, the managing director. I think, Pastor Joy, I've had this belief that I go for it. After nobody will do anything to me. And I think that's what I learned from Father Grimes. I don't go through people. So I went to Ginger and I waited for the secretary. I keep remembering him. I walked in to see Ronnie Madvan and I said, I'm told you have interest in somebody who can do PR. So I said, yeah, let me see what you've done. And I walked out with a job in Nile Breweries. And I went in, worked for the Nile Breweries, grew in ranks from PR officer to PR manager. And then South African Breweries took over Nile Breweries. Now, brand management was a totally new area in Africa and even most of the world. So they approached me and said, we want to appoint you as a brand manager. Is that something? So I kept thinking, what is brand management? They took me through what it was. So I must say, I must have been one of the first brand managers in the country. Because after we were appointed, Uganda Breweries appointed, Celtel then, which is Airtel, so appointed because it was a new move. So I was trained in South Africa by the South African breweries. I was trained in different countries, and I became I became the leading brand manager, and all the brands that were launched then, Nile Special Lager, branding, the look, the visibility, I was charge of it. Club, I was charge of it. So branding, you had to use your brain to think. What do people think? So that was the brewery. When I was in the brewery, I got a job opportunity in Uganda Revenue Authority of a PR manager. But remember, I had already shifted to brand manager. And brand manager was a totally new virgin area that was, you could see where you're going in the next 20 years.
Is that the same as Jackie Rokare?
Yes, Jackie.
Yes.
Jackie
Were you just a few?
Yes, Jackie was a 1 year, I think she was just ahead of me by a year or two. But then I moved into brand marketing before her. Because that South African Breweries was very aggressive by their nature. They were in so many countries globally. So once they did that, the doors opened. So Jackie, like me, also did the chartered marketing and so on. So
you're very few. Is that what is it like now?
Now
they are quite a number.
Very good.
Yes.
And we've been playing roles because sometimes they look at you as a mentor. You even find them and say, we remember you, and we kept thinking, want to be like you. So you take them through what they need to do. Because brand marketing is not about anything. If you're working in the brewery, you don't have to drink when you're brand marketing manager. Because your brain has to be very alert and sober and thinking. It's more of strategic thinking of what you need to do to grow a brand, whether it's Airtel, whether it's MTN, whether it's whatever brand it is. So I did that, and I got an opportunity then after about 4 years to Uganda Revenue Authority, PR manager. There was a gentleman who used to be called Kawesa, was a known PR manager in Uganda Revenue Authority. Everything he would come on to speak.
Yes.
So I went for these interviews by the board, and the board offered me the opportunity of PR manager. When I came back, I said, but wait a minute. I was PR, and I moved to brand marketing. PR has been here for the rest of the years of the world
So
that I know.
PR now was more to do with your mass communication.
Mass communication, but also it had been around for so long that there was nothing new
Okay.
that I thought it would bring on either press, media, reports, whatever. So they were paying me salary 3 times what Nile Brewers was paying, because their salary was 600,000. I keep remembering. And I was earning 200,000.
Yes.
So I went back.
Oh, you were earning 200 in brewers,
and
now
URA.
this gave you
Remember,
600.
URA was the go-to place to work.
Exactly.
At that time, everybody wanted to go to URA. 600,000. I think 620,000. So when I went back with this letter, everybody was like, what? 620? She's so lucky. And then they get a blow of their lives. I said, I'm not taking the job.
You decided
I
not to
did not
take the
the
job.
So they said, she must be crazy. What's happening to this young girl? Everybody had their own question.
Why
So
didn't
that time,
you take that job?
because of that, I believe we need to start early, clarity of purpose. I think I started early on clarity of what I wanted. If you noticed, right from turning down a master's in roads, because I didn't think I wanted to remain closed in, to now this one, which was taking me back to just the PR role, which wouldn't give me the leadership and all the other bits. So I went back, and the commissioner then, Zake, he's now, I think, in the USA. I think he was one of the first commissioner generals plus Albright, sat with me and said, you need to explain, because you see the board is waiting. And then I told him, I said, Commissioner General, I have got opportunity for masters. But I'm thinking, because if I go for a masters, there's no way I will do a new job. So he said, okay, put it in writing. If you went to URA today, you'll find that file. Because I wrote my letter, I appreciated the opportunity to get the job. I went back and I kept thinking, I hope I've made the best decision. But this money, the money was good. But later in years, I realized that that was the best decision.
So you went for a master's?
No, I went back to the brewery.
Oh, so you just had to give an excuse.
I gave an excuse, although already my mind was ready to start thinking of a master's because I'd moved to brand marketing. And a new job cannot allow you to do a master's. So you rather stay where you are to advance your career, because they understand you and they are willing to be patient with you, than a new place where you've reported this month and next month you'd want to do a master's. So knowing that my career, I was a bit ready for the next step, on top of the salary and on top of the fact that brand marketing was a new hot area that, your brain and everything was alert. So I didn't take that job. I came back, continued with the Nile breweries. Of course, they increased my salary a bit.
Because they knew that you had,
I wrote
you were going to leave.
Yes, the MD, Ron Madivan, responded and said, do not do anything, do not go for the job, we are going to talk. Came, they offered me a car. That's almost 2 years into my job. Said, pick your car. I picked a car. They improved my salary. Of course, not to URA, but they made life a bit better to say, we value you, but we are not able to. So I said with the brewery, and 2004, I now decided to move, because I said I have been in the product industry. For me to expound my knowledge and experience and expertise, I need to go into a service industry. So the service industry opportunities then that came my way was Uganda Telecom.
Oh,
as a head
UTL.
marketing UTL. And I was supposed to be reporting to Paul Hans. So I applied for that job. I was interviewed by some consultants and offered the job. But at the same time, NSSF had advertised the job. So I went to NSSF, did interviews, was interviewed by the board, and I was offered those 2 jobs at the same time.
Both UTL?
And the National Social Security Fund at the same time.
NSSF.
NSSF.
So which one did you
So,
take?
of course, you will always try to find reasons to leave one. So I kept thinking, so what I did, I had my mentors. I dropped an email to my mentors. And I said, and I think everybody should have a mentor. You have to reach a situation when you realize it helps. So I sent the email to the former minister, Maria Chiwanuka, who was my mentor, Ronnie Madvan, I had already left. There was Zake, the former Commissioner General, and Honorable Dawood Migereko, and Honorable Rebecca Kadaga. And I said, I have these opportunities. For Henry Kadaga, I went and met her face to face. And I said, what should I do? Herbert Zake replied and said, where does your husband work? I said, UTL. He said, don't take UTL. You can't work in the same organization with your husband.
He was in UTL.
Ronnie Madvan, knowing his mind, he was this aggressive marketing, said, take UTL. NSSF, but that time nobody wanted to work for NSSF. 2004.
Things were not.
It was the most, it was referred to as an organization that only pays when you are dead. It had the most negative rating in this country. So he said, you cannot take away your knowledge and expertise and take it to an organization that has never moved. So each of them gave feedback of what it should be. And also UTL paid me slightly better, I think by about, 800,000. They gave me a car, an office, but NSF didn't have a car. So I went back and I saw the HR manager. She's alive, Hope Bizimana, Madam Hope Bizimana. And I told her, yes, thank you very much, but I have another offer. So she said, no, we'll offer you a car. 2004. That's how I now turned down UTL.
And went to NSSF.
And why? Because if you look at my journey, I'd been going in to where there's a virgin new thing that when I leave, I've made an impact. I always wanted my brain to think UTL had already been in the country. They had done all the marketing. NSF had totally no marketing, no strategy on marketing and branding. So I said, I'm going to brand. So the new brand you see of NSSF today that everybody is proud about, that is my brand.
Wow.
I started working on it, and after 4 years, 2012, the minister launched it. And I remember in my speech, I said, now that I have launched the NSSF brand that will never go away, I'm ready to leave. And they were in shock.
So who was the managing director at that time?
The managing director was we started it with the David Jamwa, and then thereafter Richard Byarugaba.
Yes.
So we launched it when Richard Byarugaba had now joined the band, launched the new brand. After 2 years, I left NSSF. And I left NSSF for SOS Children's Villages Uganda.
Yes, yes.
That SOS, first of all, I had never heard about SOS Children's Villages Uganda, to be sincere. And when my former boss, Charles Muhozi, who was sitting on the board of SOS, sent me a message and said, Olive, they are looking for a country director for SOS. With your experience of serving on boards of the NGO sector and your knowledge in the private sector, we think you're the best placed person to be able to deliver. And then we know that you have passion for young people, kids, and I've done a lot of corporate social responsibility. So I replied and I said, no, I can't come to SOS. What is SOS? He told me it's a children's NGO. I said, but I've never heard of it. So I offered to send him 2 CVs, and I sent him 2 CVs
of other people.
He looked at the CVs. After some time, he said, but Olive, even if you gave us your CV and applied, you don't have to take the job when time comes. So I sent him the CV. A week later, a team came in from, I think, from Nairobi. And they said, yeah, we are going to talk to her. I think we're 3 of us in Serena, just about 10-15 minutes. And then they said, yeah, you have the job. So I said, but I'm not sure I want the job. So they said, we have a board meeting in Entebbe. There's an SOS village in Entebbe. Can you come in and meet the entire board? And then we discuss. So I went to Entebbe. And I reached Entebbe, and the board chair is an ambassador, Carl Wiffler. He's a consul to Austria, was the board chair. Then he said, Olive, just walk into the village and then come back. So I walked into the village. I saw these little beautiful boys and girls. My heart melted. And then the story behind, the first 3 I met had no known relative. They had no father. They had no mother. they didn't even know where they came from. I walked into all the villages. I came back to the board, and Carl Rufler said, "What do you think?" I said, "Board chair, how come I don't know SOS?" He said, "That's why we want to hire you." So I went back home, and I don't know exactly what happened because, I had said I can't go for SOS because one, it was going to pay me slightly less salary than NSSF. The benefits, all those flashy benefits that we had in NSSF were not going to be there. But I think I just woke up, I either dreamt or something, but something talking to me and saying, if no one who is good goes to do the work, who will do the work? I woke up, I went to NSSF, and my mind was ready to resign. But the night before, I talked to my family, my kids, my husband, and I said, guys, I have an opportunity with SOS, but you have to be prepared. A, B, C, D is not going to be there. And then my son said, but mommy, you like children, go for what makes you
happy.
Even my husband, go for what makes you happy and whatever. Just like that. So I go to NSSF. The board chair was the late Ivan Chayonka, who was in his shell. I didn't know how to tell him. So I rang his wife. She's around, and I said, I'm looking for the board chair. His phone is off. But I wanted to let him know that I have resigned. Because we had been told, when you want to resign, first put in the resignation letter. Because if you don't, you will not be able to resign. So that's how I now leave NSSF. When Ivan calls me immediately, the late Chayonka, he was one of my mentors, he said, Olive, I don't think it's the right decision. We see you as somebody who will start your own agency. So I said, Chair, I want to just go and serve. So later, he was happy with me. That's how I joined SOS Students Villages Uganda. I found it when it was in a very bad state, management, with no management, everybody had resigned. I lifted it back to the brand that became a big brand. And 2 years later, I was appointed on the global board, Global Management Council for SOS, representing the whole of Africa. Because SOS is in 135 countries. It's the oldest children NGO in the world. So I got that opportunity to be appointed on that management council, the highest governing council for SOS International. And I was the only African on that board 2 years later. And when I asked them, they said, no, we are looking for innovation. The NGOs are moving away from the old way that we were. So you brought in a lot of innovation on how we can look at NGO. So that's my career journey from SOS. I applied for NSSF job, Civil Aviation. Because I had served on the board of Civil Aviation Authority. So one time I see an advert in the newspapers, it fitted me. I think when you build your career path with a clarity of purpose, you keep looking and saying, am I strong on finance? I was strong. Am I strong on aviation? So you mark yourself up. So when I saw the ad, I said, but do I want to go and work for Civil Aviation Authority? Maybe not. So I did apply. My application was made on the last day of the closure. So I sat on my day, I said, but I've always believed in trying and not failing to try. I said, what will they do to me? Let me apply for this job. If I get it, I'll decide if I really want the job or not. Or I'll take the job. So that's what exactly.
That's how you ended up.
For this job, went for the interview, excelled in the interviews, was given the job. The rest is history. I come back in this job, and that's how my career journey on jobs happens. And then I've continued to do a number of courses. And as you know, Joy, in my career, 2022, I was nominated, and I became one of the Africa Women Leaders Award. I got an award, Africa Women Leaders Award in Mauritius. I think about 2 African women. By the time you get there, your journey is already mapped up. 2024, which is this year, September, during the UN General Assembly, I again received the Global Women Leaders Awards in New York, which was on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. We were about, I think, 9 ladies. Some of them were first ladies in about 3 countries. And
you're the only Ugandan?
Yes. No, there was the Prime Minister. She also received that award, and myself. And for me, that was the epitome. I felt that because even the way I got the email, the email came in and said, you have been nominated for the Global Women Leaders Award, which will be in New York. I said, these are the normal funny emails that come around. I said, who is that one who can know me from anywhere? I didn't respond. And then 1 week later, the email came and said, for you to be awarded, you have to accept a nomination. So I kept thinking, but there are names which I want to refer to, which I saw and said, this must be fake. So the 3rd week, and my secretary in the office actually kept laughing because I kept saying that these mails, there must be these mails that are not correct. Then the final mail comes in and shows the professors of the New York University that are part of the process. And then it mentions we've invited the Prime Minister of Uganda to be a keynote speaker. And then it says it will be on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, because it was actually at the time of the General Assembly. Then I rushed. I said, oh my God, it's for real. This is real. God is great. So I responded quickly, accepting the award. And that's it. So I traveled to New York and I received this Global Women Leaders Award last year, September. And still, if you look at the CV and what they unpack, they tell the story, they tell the journey. Yes, and I think that's what I can share in my career.
That's a great story. Now, Mrs. Lumonya, we're almost going to close, but can you just tell us briefly about your family? We can't end this show without you telling us about your family.
My family, I'm married to Mr. Sam Lumonya, and I have 4 children, of course, adults. My firstborn is Ian Lumonya. He's now married. He got married last year, in June. So I'm a proud mother-in-law with a very beautiful bride of my son. And then my second, and he's a lawyer by profession, who is now working with the NSSF. He works with the investment department. He did law, but he believes he wants to do sales and other things. So he said, but mom, you're also the same. For him, at first, actually, when he finished his law, he said, I'm not even going to do LDC. I insisted. I said, how? He said, yes, I did law, but I want to do business. Finally, he went in for law and performed well and completed his LDC. My second born is Winnie Lumonya. She's a lawyer. She graduated also about 2 years ago, and she's working with RENU. RENU is an NGO that deals with internet provision, internet in the universities and schools. She did her degree in Strathmore University and also attended her LDC here. And she was the best at LDC. Did a campus, and I remember her in the newspaper. My third born, Ethan Lumonya, is a second-year student in Cyprus University. He's doing IT. And then my baby, I think whenever I say my baby, those with babies keep wondering, because my baby, Elaine Lumonya, she's 17 years old. She's a student of Gaza High School, but she competed for the Rotary Exchange Program and was lucky to get that scholarship. So right now she's in the USA, in Dayton.
For 1 year?
For 1 year, just for that 1 year, where she's been enrolled in an international private school. She's doing very well. It's a good experience for that change. She'll be returning in June this year. So those are my children. And my mom, as I said, she's still alive. My brothers are still there.
Right.
So,
that's nice. So, Mrs. Lumonya, we're about to close. I would like you to look into the camera. Is there anything that you'd like to tell the people that are watching you, the people that are inspired by your story, the young people out there that would like to be just like you? Are you mentoring any young people? Please talk to them.
Okay, maybe just before I go to that, you talked about balancing. How to balance life. I think the hardest thing is balancing. And sometimes when I'm talking to young people or new professionals into the field, because the question they keep asking, how did you manage it? You're a wife, you have children, 4 children, you have your master's, you have your degree, you have a career path.
You're on boards.
On boards. I think you need to learn how to balance your life. One of the things that I've done, if I pulled out my diary today, in my diary, I mix my family and all other activities in one diary. So if you tell me there's a meeting on Tuesday 20th, I'll open that page and I'll find my daughter's visiting day. And I'll say I have my daughter's visiting day. So I have merged my diary of all activities into one. The second one is engaging my family. In this job, if you've noticed, in all these job changes that I've moved, I've engaged my family that now I've got this job with the Uganda Civil Aviation Authority. It's very hectic. It will make me travel a lot, and they've blessed it. So when they don't see me, they are moving with me. They're saying, but mommy's job is very busy. The other one is as my children are growing up, which I cannot forget. I made them part and parcel of my activities. I love the gym. So what I would do, my children would prepare my bag and they would remind me, but mommy, you didn't go, your gym is on tomorrow. And then they compete on who has prepared the bag. What it did, it took away the guilt of saying, now I brought the kids from school and now I'm going to the gym. Most mothers feel that it's a responsibility that if you take a child to school, how do you go to the gym? So for me, I found ways of making my children to become part and parcel of my activities. To date, they'll even remind me, one of them will say, mommy, today, what did you have? So you have to find a way of marrying those activities in there, but engage your family, because if you take a job and things don't seem to be moving and you're not available, they blame you. If they are part of it and you keep sharing a lot with them, they walk the journey with you. All you need is the strength and knowledge that you have a support pillar to move in that direction, because there are always challenges in these jobs. When you hear the stories of my job, and don't think it has all been rosy. There have been moments of challenges, various challenges, that you need a support pillar, and that's a family. You need a support pillar, and that's a friend. So to be able to balance all those, you must have that kind of career path where you have a support pillar in order to progress. Mentorship, I think I must say I've started last year on Women's Day. I launched a mentorship program for in leadership. I called it Mentorship for Leadership. And we started with a webinar, which we started and we said how to grow into the boardroom. I remember we had about 300 people logging on for that webinar. And thereafter, many of them registered for the mentorship program. Sometimes my schedule has been very busy, but it's a passion. Last year, we were able to graduate about 15 of them who have gone through a path of about 8 weeks of mentorship. So what I'm looking at going forward is a mix. I'll have those that I'm going to mentor as a give back to them, because I will know which children need them. And then that will be supported, the program will be supported with those who can afford to contribute towards the program. So I launched it. I just have to create the time to make sure that it can actually give us what we need.
How can someone reach out to you?
I think if you looked out for me on LinkedIn or Facebook, but mainly LinkedIn, that's where I've been sharing the programs on mentorship, you'll be able to reach out to me. If you noticed, I think there was the issue of Makerere University.
Yes.
The one of recently.
Yes, you were presenting something at the graduation.
Yes, I was invited by Makerere University last week on the graduation to be a commencement speaker. Commencement speaker is more or less like a guest speaker. Because if you've noticed, whenever there are graduations, Uganda has just started it, and I think Makerere, this was going to be the first time, but many universities globally, they bring in what you call commencement speakers who mentor or who give these young people, before they go into the field, the realization and confidence and trust that they can make it. So in that mentorship or in that commencement speech, one is supposed to share their story, their journey, and show them that they can actually make it. And much as I didn't present on that day, some of the things I shared with them is that for me, I've always been active. I used to bake cakes, Pastor Joy, these small cakes, and I would distribute them in all the supermarkets in my senior 6. At university, I continued with that. So if you notice, you'd find me with baking cakes, I'm writing stories in the newspapers, I'm doing ABCD. Now that innovativeness takes you out from the fear of not being employed. So how innovative, how creative are you going to be? So those are some of the things I shared with the few students that I was able to talk to, because due to the time, we're not able to address the whole audience. And I think that's what I can share, Joy.
Thank you very, very much, Mrs. Lumonya. We are very grateful you were able to come onto the show. Many people have been blessed by this show. I know that they have learnt a lot from you and they're inspired.
Maybe prayer.
Prayer?
Yes. I just want to add that my whole journey, as you see it, has been a journey of prayer. I can't forget that.
Yes.
For me, even in my P7, my S4, my senior 6, because I don't believe that I've done whatever I've done because I'm the brightest,
exactly,
the most knowledgeable. There are so many. So for me, I believe I have had the blessings of God. And pray, and I sometimes I wonder when I find somebody who says they don't believe or they don't pray. For me, I pray. My children know, mommy prays. I'll pray and thank God for every single step that I move. So I think I want to encourage everybody, mix the success, mix the challenges, mix everything you have, but pray and thank God. Find time to say, thank you, God, for this. And I've walked that journey to date with that, and I don't intend to stop.
Amen.
Because I believe I'm what I am because God has laid a journey for me, but what I need is to enable it by being.
I'd like to thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time, my name is Pastor Joy Ninsiima. May the Lord bless you, expand your territories and borders, lay his hand upon you, and keep you far away from evil. Bye-bye.